You're with Alan Juddy, and this is another episode of Seed Dating, the podcast where you meet one of Agricom's forage products, learn about its attributes, and match it to your farm system. And here to help nurture this new blossoming relationship is our very own forage relationship expert, Alistair Moorhead. Hi, Al, and who are we going to meet today?
Hi, Juddy. Really excited about this one. Let's meet Mainstar forage rape. It's the star of regrowth.
Wow, Al, is that a brassica?
Yes, Juddy, it's Brassica napus.
Yeah, napus.
Oh, I see what you did there, Juddy. That was awful.
Yeah, it was. So tell me a little bit about forage rapes. What are they and how do we use them?
Forage rapes are typically have historically been used in the east coast of New Zealand, which is our dry part of the New Zealand landscape, both North Island and South Island. And in history, their use has been as summer safe pasture for a landscape that may have endophyte, for example, toxic endophyte, and therefore we have summer ill thrift in the greater grass landscape. And rapes in history have been used as summer safe environments. We actually didn't know why at that time animals weren't doing well on the east coast of New Zealand, but we now know why. But the point is the rape crops were used to get through summertime when animal health was often extremely poor in the New Zealand system.
So if I'm looking at a rape plant with obviously a stemmed plant with leaves coming off that.
Yes, correct.
And capable, as a if you were going for one grazing or multiple grazings, capable of producing sort of how much dry matter do we think?
Yeah, look, what it is it's a crop that sort of still stores feed in a first from sowing to grazing, and it stores feed so it takes stored moisture from springtime, converts it to a standing mass of feed, as you rightfully say, broken between a stem and a leaf component, and depending on the type you've got, defines how much it can grow in a certain time frame, and then it basically it can be eaten. And when you tend to try to eat a rape, my belief structure is you should try to eat as much of it as possible. You've grown it, use it. And what I mean by that is you should eat as much of the stem as possible on that first grazing. It's a major component of yield. It's a major component of what you're stocking your animals for. You should ask them to eat as much as you can at the first growth. The moment the apical point of the stem is eaten, it triggers a whole lot of nodes at where the leaf scars are, where the leaf has fallen off as the stem is elongated. And those nodes are triggered, and in a given time, they will all create a whole new growing point full of leaves for the next regrowth cycle. So rapes are really defined by their ability to trigger a regrowth cycle.
So what's the backstory to Mainstar? So tell me a little bit about what Mainstar is in terms of the maturity levels and where did we first see that?
Well, the category is quite an interesting one because you define it by not necessarily being the highest yielding style of rape in the industry. And what you tend to find is in trials where you run a first graze rape system, you quite often run a trial that might run out to about 90 days. It typically is the historic traditional one graze rape system tends to be on a 90-day to 100-day rotation to first grazing. Now, at that point, this style of rape might be 25% behind in yield.
Right.
And one of the things that leads to is that last 25 days, you've just been sitting there. It's achieved its almost a ceiling yield, and it's just sitting there. Well, other genetics moves on, gets taller, creates more total yield. So the point really is there's no reason to leave it for much longer than 75 days. And that is a time that the majority of Mainstar paddocks are ready to be grazed in that window of 70 to 75 days post-sowing. This is important because when you're driving for regrowth, the time that you first graze a paddock reflects when you start grazing, not when you finish grazing. And so the important part is the sooner you can start grazing, the sooner you can eat what's there, which may take you nearly 20 days. And then you can get off it and allow it to start regrowing. And as I've said, the sooner you start grazing, spend your time grazing the paddock, and then getting off defines how many regrowth cycles you can actually get in a calendar year.
Yeah, so the critical part about Mainstay is the fact that it is a regrowth rape, and what you're after is multiple grazings of this crop.
And the reason you get multiple grazings and what makes it really functional in that role is that you start early. And if you start early, you give yourself the time to get those regrowth cycles. Typically, it's about 35 days, depending on exactly how hot and dry you are to how fast you can get back in. And if you do your maths, you're sowing in mid to late October. In our case, that's mid to late spring. Yep. You then waiting 75 days for your grazing. You're already out into the middle of summer, and then you require 35 days for regrowth. Now, if you've got a 90-day rape, you're literally running out of time to get multiple regrowth cycles. So the earlier you start grazing is the wider the window for regrowth you get.
So,
and Mainstar is very, very good at that.
So Mainstar, talk to me about some of the farm systems that it might employ that. You've talked about it's really at home in that summer dry, taking spring moisture and creating a bank of feed. Can you think about some of the farm systems where that's really useful?
Well, I sort of see this style as it's and when a farmer considers using the different styles of rapes in their program, it is about when their stock classes are becoming available to be grazed. It really seems silly that you've got a finishing animal system and they are arriving at the first month of summer, and your crop is not ready to the start of the second month of summer. And you've got a big window of time where if you put them on the crop, you've got some animal health issues that may occur with rapes, photosensitivity, which is, rape scald can occur if you graze crops too early. And, you've just got this big window of time. So you work backwards, in my opinion, from the stock classes when they require the summer crops. You look for your maturity date associated when you need the first grazing to start occurring. I see Mainstar as part of the start of a grazing system, not necessarily the whole grazing system. You might consider a higher yielding later starting rape for the second half of your program, or even a regrowth kale option. But for the start of your grazing system, Mainstar is outstanding because you can start early and get into a regrowth cycle early. So coming back to your part of your question is like, how might you fit it in a system? If you have had success of utilizing rape and rape mixes where you're utilizing other species such as our Ecotane plantain, relish red clover, choice chicory, even at times a little bit of Italian ryegrass. If you sow this with a rape species, logic is you sow it with an early maturity 75-day rape because you're grazing them while they're well sheltered, they're creating a shading effect, but you're grazing them early enough that they don't have to sit under a big canopy crop for another 20 or 30 days.
Yeah, I think that's really important. It's one of the reasons that you would go to one of these type products is if you are putting some of the herbs and clovers underneath it. One of the things that really reduces that effectiveness of that is having big tall covers and being there for a long time.
Absolutely.
And also
an elevated stocking rate to actually eat the big covers.
Yes. And so with that, if you're set stocking, it's those herbs and clovers that get bared out underneath that. So this seems to be a really good fit if that was what you were trying to achieve as a herb and clover blend out the other end of that. In terms of these modern types, talk to me a little bit about aphid tolerance.
Exceptional. It would be a market-leading position for aphid tolerance in New Zealand. Now, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that, Mainstar is very much a replacement for a historic product that we use called Winfred, which was a massive part of my career, both in Australia and in New Zealand. But that style and that family group was very much an aphid magnet, which never stopped it performing or being functional in the landscape. We just made sure we ate it while it was under that pressure. But the reality is it did impact its plant health during periods of stress where aphids were highly aggressive. And more importantly, if you're in a system that you are spraying for those aphids, you'll be spraying every paddock. Mainstar's aphid tolerance is quite exceptional. Does it mean you don't have to spray every paddock? No. but greatly increases your chances of not having to spray a paddock by using a cultivar choice with a high aphid tolerance. And Mainstar is an absolute market leader for aphid tolerance.
And it seems to me quite a versatile crop too. There's in terms of rainfall, in terms of stock type, in terms of soil fertility, it's something that can actually move across a lot of those landscapes.
Absolutely, and part of that is because you can get into it early. Maturity or not, having brassica in too high a fertility or too high a moisture zones is a problem because it often they don't stop growing. And if they don't stop growing, it changes the rules around when they are being able to regraze. Now, Mainstar is not perfect with this, but it's far more successful if you're using an early maturity type in that situation than a very tall late maturity type that doesn't stop growing. So next thing you're dealing with 5 foot, 6 foot crops of rape that are higher than the back tyres of your tractor. And that is very difficult if you're in those sort of fertile high rainfall zones. So Mainstar fits in that category more. It's not a preferred place for using it, but the reality is it's a good option.
Ding. Well, what a star. Mainstar, the absolute star of regrowth. I think we've heard about that today. So in summary, Mainstar, it's a modern, early maturating rape. As you point out, Alistair, really good aphid tolerance, versatile and capable of multiple regrowths, particularly because you're starting early in that cycle.
Yep, Juddy, it's a modern version of a very old classic.
Well, today I'm identifying as a summer dry lamb finisher, right? And this Mainstar forage rape is going to be great company on my property, so I'm swiping right. You've been listening to an episode of Seed Dating with Al and Juddy. Hope you can catch another episode real soon.